Hey there, my name is Alex, I am the Silvermont, and this is a preview for the upcoming World of Warcraft expansion, Legion, coming out at the end of August, around a month from now. I'm going to start this video with a quick disclaimer and some background information, but if you'd rather skip that and get right into the preview, click the annotation on screen, here, or check the description for a timecode. Thanks. So, I received access to the Legion beta through the Octoly program, as I've had videos on various other Blizzard titles in the past. I received no monetary compensation for covering Legion, and decided to cover it because, well, I used to play a lot of World of Warcraft. To elaborate, I played WoW heavily up until 2007, at which point I quit. I returned at the launch of Warlords of Draenor and played for a few months before quitting again. I experienced high-level PvP and raiding through Burning Crusade content, but I don't know much about the current state of PvP and raiding. That out of the way though, let's get started. I have to kick things off by saying that Legion is the first expansion I've had an active interest in for a long time for World of Warcraft. I was incredibly hyped for Burning Crusade back in the day, and although I quit before it came out, Wrath of the Lich King seemed exciting, and a lot of people seem to think it's the best expansion. Cataclysm? Neat concept I suppose, but Mists of Pandaria and Warlords? I'm sure there's people who liked them, but I had zero interest in them. I thought it was nice that Mists of Pandaria seemed a bit more light-hearted of an expansion, but I'm not sure how much that actually worked in the long run. Although some of the new zones were fun to explore, I suppose, but Warlords? It seemed utterly pointless to me. Filler. Legion almost seems to be Burning Crusade 2.0, and I don't just mean because it's green and Illidan is on the cover, and we're getting more Burning Legion stuff, but they also seem to be retreading a lot of story elements from Burning Crusade, read retcons. Blizzard seemed really unhappy with how they handled Illidan, and I would agree that it was done poorly. Remember how we stormed the Black Temple and put down Illidan? Most of the plot of that expansion was, let's kill Illidan, he's bad, but turns out he wasn't really doing anything that bad. As a matter of fact, he was doing a far more important and competent job than we, as adventurers, had been doing in the Burning Crusade, successfully invading and even destroying Legion worlds with his demon hunters. I'm not entirely sure how Blizzard are going to spin that, but it could be an interesting take on how the players are essentially mercenaries who don't do what is right, but just what people tell them to do. I'm not entirely sure how they are going to tackle the story of Legion, come to think of it, but considering the expansion kicks off with some big lore characters dying, I guess we'll see. The big feature of the expansion is the second hero class being added to the game, Demon Hunter. One that has been highly requested since as long as I can remember. And man, I gotta say, I find it a little funny that both hero classes that they've added to the game have been super edgy. Death Knights and Demon Hunters. That said, Demon Hunter's class intro channels the Death Knight starting area quite heavily. You'll be working for a bad guy, but you won't be quite as evil as the Death Knight was, as you're still just fighting demons as opposed to human beings. But how is Demon Hunter itself? I've enjoyed it so far. It has a lot of mobility options and feels a little bit like the Monk or the Rogue to me, with a bit of Warlock thrown in for good measure. I do have an issue with skill synergy, but that's more of a widespread issue with WoW. Like the rest of the classes, you will have a class hall as a Demon Hunter, a place you and every other player of the same class can visit. Here you can do missions similar to the Garrison ones, recruiting followers and sending them out, the missions taking several real-time hours. It's basically a Facebook-style minigame. Not all that interesting, but it gives you incentive to hop on every day, and you can get quite a lot of gold from it, or at least you could, back in Warlords. At this mini-hub you'll also choose which of the new areas to tackle first, making a change from prior expansions. You can essentially challenge any of the new areas in any order you choose. Whether or not you prefer that is of course up to you. Some might like it, others might prefer having the old linear style of Zone A leading to Zone B, Hellfire Peninsula leading to Zangarmarsh for example. Was it even called Hellfire Peninsula? I forget, but you get the idea. But getting back to the Demon Hunter, they have a lot of nice tricks. You can double jump, you can glide, you have I-beams and AoE stuns, lots of mobility and in general feel quite active and engaged. It's a long way from the vanilla rep paladin or arms warrior of just auto-attack spamming until you can whack people with your damage dealer. But at the same time, it's not quite at the level of Monk's mindless button spam, or at least that's what Monk seemed like to me. How will it fit into the game's existing class balance? Personally, I can't at the moment see any particular reason to take them as either DPS or a tank, they're 2 specs, over the other classes who can DPS or tank. But then I'm not really in touch with the game at the moment on that level. For several years, Blizzard have been following the philosophy of bring the player and not the class, which personally I disagree with, but at the same time it means you'll probably be perfectly viable as a Demon Hunter, or any other class / spec. If you want to DPS as a rep paladin, I'm sure you can, whereas if you tried that in vanilla, people would be very unhappy with you. But let's talk about those classes and their skills for a moment. That's what makes up the combat of WoW, your skills, when to use them, why to use them, and so forth. Now, considering WoW has been around for so long, it's only natural that you'll run into the problem that if you keep adding skills, eventually classes will have too many. To combat this, Blizzard have culled and combined some skills over the years, and some people think the aggressive culling is also leading to a console release, which, whilst it could happen, I don't imagine it coming anytime soon personally. Who knows, maybe they'll announce that at BlizzCon just to make me look stupid. The skill synergy is a bit of a problem for me. They've tried to fix that too. Paladins, for example, now build up holy energy with some skills and spend it with others. And I say now, they've been doing that for a few years, but hey. But I don't really like the mechanic. It works fine for rogues, but recycling it for paladins? I'm not a huge fan of that, but it's a personal complaint. I prefer it when skills synergize very well with each other, and you can combo from one to the other, outside of something really obvious like stunning someone so they're rooted and you can hit them with a big damage dealer. Another small complaint I have. In the past in WoW you had the option to hide your helm and your hat, your cloak and so forth, but that option appears to be gone in the current build of Legion. I believe that it has been replaced with an option to transmogrify the item into being invisible. But that's not a good change if true. It's much easier to just select something in the options rather than having to visit a transmog station every single time you want to change it, for every single item you get. On the plus side, I believe they are making it so you can hide the shoulder armor too now, and I know a lot of people hate the shoulder armor in WoW because it's huge. Speaking of transmogs though, they've reworked that system quite a lot. If you don't know what it is, transmogging is essentially changing the appearance of your armor whilst retaining the stats. This is a brilliant feature as typically endgame characters will all be wearing the same gear, whatever the best raid armor is. And people almost always enjoy expressing their individuality. The new system is quite similar to the one from Diablo 3. Once you have an item, it's stored in your transmog library. Once you get an item for the first time, you can always change another item to look like that. You can swap any other item to share its appearance. And you can also save different sets of armor and gear, which I think that's been around for a while, but they've streamlined it a bit, you could say. It's a nice rework and a feature that I personally enjoy, very much so, whereas other people might ignore it completely. Perhaps tied with Demon Hunter as the largest new feature would be the Artifact Weapon system. Very early into the expansion you will get an artifact weapon for your character that you can level up, upgrade, enhance and generally keep as your go-to crusher of vermin. I think this is a fundamentally neat concept but also somewhat flawed. I like the idea of keeping one weapon that you can customize and upgrade, but I'm not a fan of said weapon being a famous lore weapon in most cases. I would rather that each player got to create their own weapon from scratch. I think the best way to explain why I don't really like how it is at the moment would be to describe what happened when I received mine. A fellow demon hunter remarks on some immeasurably powerful blades held by a traitorous demon hunter. After hunting him down and claiming them, the demon hunter who sent me on this quest congratulated me on acquiring this unique, potentially war-deciding weapon. And then the cutscene faded out, and dozens of near-identical players phased in, all holding the exact same weapon. When Fordring held the Ashbringer, it was special. When every single Ret Paladin receives Ashbringer with no effort, I'm not a fan of that. I fully understand that MMOs obviously need to make the player feel unique and special, even when there's thousands of others doing the same thing as you are. But even when high-end raiders might receive Atiesh or Ashbringer, it's a little different to handing out Doomhammer to everyone an hour in. So whilst I don't like it from an immersion or lore perspective, I do like the idea of keeping a weapon and upgrading it over the course of the expansion. I do wonder what they're going to do when the next expansion rolls around though, if it is. I mean, is everyone just going to lose their artifact weapons or something? I don't know. Mixed feelings there. Personally, I would have made it so that each character, each player, creates their own weapon from scratch. Like they say, you are now our champion paladin and you need a weapon to match. Maybe instead of taking the actual Ashbringer, maybe get the gem from Ashbringer that made it so powerful in the first place, and have that be the core component for your weapon, and then the player can decide, do they want a sword, do they want a mace, or whatever, you know? And then they could even give it their own name. And then when another player inspects it, it would say like, I don't know, the Basher of Demons, and then in brackets, artifact weapon, so they don't go, wait, what is this weapon with a weird name? I've never seen that before. The artifact weapon would let them know that it is what that player has called their artifact weapon. But at the same time, I'm sure there are lots of players who are really hyped up to get the Ashbringer and use it at last. I know it might not make sense to some people. Oh, why do you not care that potentially every warrior could get Ashcandy? It's not the fact that you can get lore weapons that bothers me, it's the fact that everyone gets them without any sense of achievement or accomplishment. You are literally just handed a really powerful, famous weapon, and I don't like that. Now, obviously, what with WoW being an MMO, I can't complete it and review it fully, outside of the fact that I only have a few days to, you know, play the beta at all, but what I've seen so far of the Legion beta has been good. But it is still more of the same. The expansion begins with big dramatic scenario quests, and then you're soon back into, you know, go here, kill 5 pigs, go here, kill 50 pigs, blah blah blah. They have streamlined it, they have improved quest diversity and variability and enjoyability and all those great words, but if you never liked WoW, I doubt this expansion is going to change anything for you. It is still the same game, even if it's almost unrecognisable from that vanilla product a decade ago. It's definitely nice to have the game almost fully voiced, and the phasing cutscenes have come a long way, and that's great. Although at times I feel like the epic scripted moments are trying a little hard. Instead of focusing on the spectacle, they focus on the size, throwing a bazillion NPCs on screen at once, so everything turns into a huge cluster of laser beams and your frame rate explodes into nothing. It's not personally to my liking, but it's still a vast improvement over what we've had in the past. Speaking of frame rate and screen-filling effects though, how about performance and visuals? WoW has always employed a cartoony art style that ages very well, but the game is old now, and even when it came out, WoW wasn't exactly what anyone called a pretty game. It performs well enough on my system, but considering how old the game is, I feel like it should perform, well, better. So far as I understand, they just keep patching up and adding on enhanced visual effects, but the game has been out for 10 years now. I think it's due a complete engine rehaul. That's 10 years since it came out, by the way. You have to also consider how long it was in development before it came out. Probably like at least 4 or 5 years, so the technology behind the game is really old at this point. And again, I think it's due a complete engine rehaul. Legion or Warlords would have been the perfect time for that. The inconsistency between new assets and old assets is really alarming. There was Cataclysm where they remade most of the world, yeah, but they need to remake the entire game on a new engine. That's what I think. Still, the biggest concern I would have is a lack of post-launch support. I played Warlords for several months, and even after I unsubscribed, I kept up to date with the game for a while. and it feels to me that Warlords had virtually no post-launch support. That's a big problem for an MMO that you pay monthly for. You aren't paying for maintenance and server farms or anything like that. You are paying for the developers to keep developing content for the game that you are playing. You shouldn't be paying them for content that you'll have to pay more to access. Destiny had this exact same problem. They would leave a skeleton crew to add in tiny new crumbs of content whilst the majority of the team worked on the next expansion. Of course, Destiny wasn't a pay monthly game. World of Warcraft is. Vanilla World of Warcraft had 7 or 8 raids and several dungeons added to the game. The latest expansion, Warlords, it had 3 raids. Hellfire Citadel came out April 2015. What have people been doing for well over a year? I really hope Legion isn't going to suffer in the same way, because you can't expect people to play for like 12 to 18 months with essentially 0 new content. Well, I hope this video doesn't seem too negative so far, but I'm afraid that's probably how it's being conveyed. I didn't hate my time with the Legion beta, I actually enjoyed most of it. But I try and look at things critically as I feel that's more important. WoW has done a lot of things right, that's why it was the largest MMO in the world, and in many ways it has improved over the years, even if in other ways it has regressed or lost some of its soul. At the end of the day, if you enjoy WoW, I think you'll enjoy this expansion. If you're looking for an excuse to get back into WoW, now's the time. If you're new to MMOs and you want one to hop in, again, even 10 years into the game's life, now would be a good time. But if you didn't enjoy WoW, I don't think anything so vital has changed that going back to it now would change your mind. I'm not entirely sure who the devs are marketing this expansion towards. Existing players, old players, new players. I'm inclined to think that it's for existing players though. Will I be resubscribing? Maybe to see some of the story stuff, but I can kind of find that out just, you know, by keeping up to date with the game. But right now I'm thinking not. And not because the beta turned me off, but more because I'm currently subscribed to another game, Final Fantasy XIV. I don't even want to know how many hours I've put into WoW over the years, but I've made the journey from 1 to 60. Most of the old journey to Grand Marshal, the journey to 70, then the journey from 1 to 100, almost all the raids. Final Fantasy XIV on the other hand, I'm enjoying just going through the story for the first time, and enjoying playing it with friends. And that's the main thing. MMOs are social games. If you have a choice of MMO 1 with 0 friends or MMO 2 with friends, you should play MMO 2. If you have even one friend to play an MMO with, you'll enjoy it a lot more. That said, thank you so much for watching, and if you have any questions, please do ask them down in the comments, and I'll do my best to answer. Until next time, you take care.
If you wish to claim the Aegis, seek these ancient rulers and prove to them your merit. Only those deemed worthy shall pass the trial of valor.